Time no longer, Chapter 4, Part A, Seals. Prophecy number 2 looks at another aspect of time in a different segment of humanity. Prophecy number 1 described the struggle of God's church throughout the ages. Prophecy 2 begins in Revelation 4 by describing God's throne and the 24 elders with the 7 spirits of God around the throne of God. The elders may be the leading saints resurrected at the time of Christ's death. People such as Enoch and Moses, who walked with God on the earth, may be in this group. 2 humans appeared on the Mount of Transfiguration with Christ, Moses and Elijah with Jesus. Peter, James, and John were witnesses to the experience. We are told that not only were saints present in heaven before Christ's death, but at the time of his resurrection, more were taken to heaven. Surmising that these 24 were those who walked with God on earth, they may include David, Daniel, and others. The faith chapter of Hebrews, chapter 11, written by Paul the Apostle, includes 15 people of great faith mentioned by name. They are Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Joseph, Moses, Rahab, Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, and Samuel. Many others are alluded to in the faith chapter. Regardless, they are there at God's throne. God's 7 spirits could be assigned one for each continent or race of peoples. Plausible explanation, but impossible to document as fact. The 12 heads of Israel's tribes plus the 12 apostles would also add up to 24 elders. 2 Peter 3:5 allows for interpretation, but Revelation 22:19 does not allow for addition or subtraction. Care must there be taken in attempts to interpret but not change any part of this story of world history. There are also 4 beasts of varying descriptions that are in constant worship of their creator. Possibly there are other types of created beings from other universes that did not fail as did Adam and Eve. They might have passed the test of love that God might have provided them. Revelation 4 indicates they have eyes and wings and are in constant worship of God. They must therefore be creatures of intelligence and have the power of reason. Though their origin remains unclear, they are part of Prophecy 2. In God's right hand was a book containing 7 seals. The challenge to open this book and loose the seals was only met by one. Revelation 6 recounts the opening of the seals and the discussion of the time period of each seal. As Prophecy 1 deals with the history of God's church, Prophecy 2 deals with the history of the state or political government. It begins by describing a man having a bow and a white horse. This figure on the white horse represents the first world conqueror, Babylon, whose king was Nebuchadnezzar. Babylon ruled the world from 625 to 538 BC. After the Great Flood, which occurred in 2348 BC, world population was cut down to 8 human beings. It took centuries to again populate the earth. These 8 human beings grew and multiplied in number. They were scattered over the whole earth in its new configuration. The world before the Great Deluge was marvelously beautiful, with water covering only a small percentage of the new earth. Now, as these 8 survivors looked out of the ark's window, the beautiful earth had been transformed by only 40 short days of rain into a land covered by water over 70% of its surface. Gone was the beauty that they were accustomed to, and in its place lay the stark reality of water and the tremendous upheaval caused by water, erosion, and massive volcanic activity. There was still beauty to be found, but it paled in comparison to what had been before. The terribleness of sin had caused this. The indelible marks remain to this day and will only be wiped away in the earth made new by the Creator of us all. People inhabited all the areas of the earth, but North and South America remained undiscovered by the main body of civilization. Columbus' discovery of America and the Western Hemisphere doubled the amount of land available for man to inhabit as part of the civilized world. The earliest civilization recorded in antediluvian history was that of the Sumerians. Beginning in about 2500 BC, Egypt soon developed as another civilization at the other end of the known world. Ur was the capital of Samaria, lying on the eastern end of the then civilized world. This entire area was known as the Fertile Crescent, extending from Egypt on the west to Mesopotamia, which contained Sumeria on the east. Right at the center of this crescent lay Canaan. The Persian Gulf also borders the eastern end of this civilized crescent land. Abraham came from Ur and traveled this crescent all the way to Canaan, where God would set up his people right in the center of the world. Logistically, it was the best place to spread his gospel of good news that sin can be overcome with his help. Ur is situated north of the mouth of the Euphrates River, which empties into the Persian Gulf. Babylon is farther up the river towards Syria. As these civilizations began to develop, man again turned away from God. He became concerned that all his hard work and effort to rebuild the earth's civilizations would go for naught. Another flood might occur. Would it happen again? Would God destroy the world again? The civic leaders of the time decided to take matters into their own hands and chose to circumvent God and his promise to never again destroy the earth by water. The rainbow is a sign of that promise, but the ever-predictable human mind dreamed up its own plan, flood insurance, if you will. At that time, all the world spoke one language. The stories of the great flood were still vivid in the minds of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the three sons of Noah. They remembered well the 40 days of being confined in the ark as it rode out the terrible tempest. The stories of the great deluge were recounted time and time again as they were passed down through generation after generation. In order to avoid extinction, the people erected the tower to end all towers. The massive Tower of Babel was erected on the plain of Shinar. Its original name was not Babel, but it soon came to be called Babel, a name with a meaning still in use 4,000 years after its construction ceased. It could be seen for many miles and was the forerunner of the modern skyscraper, but man again was placing a direct challenge to God, his promise and his authority. Will man ever learn his lesson? The sad answer to that question is a resounding no. These people left a legacy that has carried to the modern day. God confounded their language to the point that no one could understand anything the next person said. It stalled the work completely, and it was never started up again. Thousands of workers were split up into hundreds of small groups of those whose members spoke similarly. Eventually, these groups migrated to all parts of the world. No doubt this tower stood for many centuries as a symbol of the utter confusion and despair that took place there. There is no trace of the tower today except for the hundreds of languages it spawned. In spite of the mass migration from Babel, it still took 2,000 years before the Eastern Hemisphere became sufficiently populated to create enough tension and greed in the known world for various leaders to entertain the notion of ruling the entire world. The great prophet Daniel prophesied all of these events about 600 BC. He correctly prophesied that four major powers would rule the world for the next 1,000 years until AD 476. That time, Rome, as a united kingdom, fell from its lofty perch as the greatest power in the history of the world until that time. At key times in history, God raises up great men to assist him in his efforts to save the human race. Moses, Noah, David, most certainly Daniel, were placed by God to carry the banner of his love. The methods of God are not often understood by the limited human mind. He often uses people whom humanity would never expect to be suited for such work. Moses came out of Egypt, Noah through a flood, and David the psalmist through countless battles of war. Daniel was exiled to the land of Babylon after Nebuchadnezzar besieged the city of Jerusalem in the third year of his reign, the year 622 BC. Daniel proceeded to establish a spotless reputation in Babylon and commenced to prophesy not only of Babylon's doom, but events far into the future. Above reproach and with insight and intellect far above his contemporaries, he faced the seemingly impossible task of proclaiming to the world its future. Remember, these are the descendants of those human beings who would not believe a great flood was coming and then would not believe the great flood was a one-time thing. They built the infamous Tower of Babel and continued to directly oppose God at every turn, despite their knowledge of the fact that God had always been totally truthful with them. Hard-headed is a kind description. But Daniel set out to do exactly as he was asked by God. He faced scorn, scoffers, and death numerous times. He succeeded despite insurmountable odds. His task was truly awesome, but he received an A+ for his efforts. What the world constantly tried to do was formulate its own plan for survival, ignoring those God had so kindly set out. These are the only methods that will be successful. Even if you don't believe it, just check the track records of the two. Man continues to fail miserably in every society. The world has constantly been at war for centuries, and empire after empire continues to collapse. John in chapter 6 of Revelation again describes this bitter and saga in graphic detail. It is astounding to realize that Daniel was the number 2 man in power in both of the first 2 kingdoms that ruled the civilized world of his time. He was second in command in Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon and also in the kingdom of Darius, Medo-Persia. It probably wouldn't have taken much effort for Daniel to have overthrown either one of these kings. With his vastly superior intellect and control of the army within his grasp, it would have been easy for Daniel to overthrow either one of these kings. He could have organized a conspiracy and gained the number 1 spot in all the world. But Daniel was not inclined to work for worldly power. Why? He was a man of God. Things of this world mattered not to him. He could see the bigger picture, and he only had the same information that you and I have today. He was in daily, if not constant, communication with his Maker. He, as a trusted servant of God, could and would do nothing to alter history's downhill slide in the avalanche of destruction. God trusted this man that much. Attempts to earn God's trust seemed to be just trials and tribulations to mankind. But Daniel knew and has now realized that real rewards for this course of action are incalculable. He now stands in the courts of heaven and watches as the saga of Earth's history, as he so correctly prophesied, is playing out. What a privilege that must be, but also what an agony. Daniel and many others have the privilege of being eyewitnesses to the close of this Earth's history, but do not have the ability to alter any of its terrible events. Yet it is an honor that God bestows on his faithful. Only with complete faith and trust in God can that magnificent privilege and honor be ours. Daniel foretold Earth's doom, and John reiterates this prophecy again in Revelation 6. Incredibly, despite warning after warning, the Earth stays true to its perilous course. The 4 horses symbolize the first 4 seals of Revelation 6. They represent the first 4 major world powers. These 4 horsemen are assigned colors, probably to represent the gravity of their riders' missions. Babylon rides a white horse, the Medes a red one, and the Greeks a black mount. The ruthless Roman juggernaut is astride a pale horse. All the prior world-dominating powers pale in comparison to this ominous rider. Death and hell followed Rome wherever it went, and the fourth part of the earth fell under its powerful spell and iron grip. Prior to these 4 horses riding through time, Egypt in the western reaches of the Fertile Crescent and Assyria in the east were the major players in the power structure. In approximately 1250 BC, God's little band of Hebrews, the only people faithful to him, made their exodus from Egypt and settled in Canaan. Canaan is today known as Israel. The Israelites set up their kingdom in the Promised Land right in the heart of the known world. This Hebrew kingdom had its ups and downs, but despite often ignoring their God, they survived as a civil and military power for over 600 years. Only the pale rider of the Roman horse can match that feat.